Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Jesus reminds us to watch for the signs of his return. Today we will explore further what we are seeing in our times that line up with what signs he said would indicate the potential of the end and his return. We will also discuss the practical meaning of this as we watch and as a remnant prepare as he so leads. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. Here we are, End Times Friday, and this is a cool day because it's a day after Thanksgiving that we're broadcasting this, and we're excited for that. Hope everybody's enjoying and has enjoyed their time with Thanksgiving, and I'm sure they're still a little bit on holiday, hopefully.
Yeah, and if they're anything like us, that goes straight into Christmas now. All the Christmas decorating, the trees go up, the lights go on, and festive fun is to be had.
Yeah. At our house, because Linda, and that's one of my personal favorite holidays as well, is that we've had our house decorated already for a couple of weeks. What we do is we leave our dining room and our living room, which happen to be next to each other. We do have a tree that's sitting there, and we have a kind of a circle area there, but it's still fall. So that's still Thanksgiving.
But that's the only part of your house that is still fall.
everything else is already Christmas. And Linda has this wonderful college student that is a person that comes and helps her decorate.
Oh, that's fun.
And she loves it, and she gets paid for it, so that's some income for her. But she is a great helper to Linda, so that it's not on Linda's back. And I set up all the trees, right, which is always interesting. And there's one we have we have a 12-foot tree.
Oh, do you really?
That is massive.
Oh, that's so fun.
And it's so massive that I have to have help to put it up. So we have a guy that helps us.
Does that go in your main family room there?
Right in front of
that's a great spot
picture
for
window. And it's so tall and so heavy that at the top of it, we have to have turnbuckles to attach it to the wall so it doesn't fall over.
Right. That's how we don't have space to have, our ceilings are not that high to do the really tall. We can get like a 10-foot in our family room, and that's as far as we can go with it. But we have learned over the years, because we have lost trees to this, to anchor it. We'll anchor it to the windows. Sometimes we'll anchor it. We'll put a kettlebell at the bottom and just strap it down so that doesn't, but we have lost our share of trees by not anchoring them. And like you guys, it sounds like, if there is, most of our trees are fake, whatever you call them, in the rest of the house. But the family room tree and the one that goes by the pool are both real. We go cut them down and enjoy that. And we are of the vein of the fattest tree that we can possibly find, the fullest thing. And so it weighs a ton. It takes up some serious space, and it has to be anchored down, just like yours. I love it.
Yeah, when we were we were first married, and we had our little daughter, and so we went out and cut, and it was going to cut a tree down. So and you go out into the forest, we cut a tree, and I bring it home, and it was so fat and so big that when I set it up, it consumed the room.
Oh yeah.
So there wasn't anywhere to sit because I had made it. I had when I was outside, it looked, well, that looks fine.
It didn't seem that big, right?
Well, that isn't going to work because it's a nice tree, but we couldn't get in the room, literally. So I had to take it back out. I can remember cutting it off. So I had to only, instead of having like a 8 or 9 foot tree, we had a 6-foot tree because I had to cut off the top.
You had to make it fit.
To make it fit. So that was always funny.
That's awesome.
But yeah, we have a good time. I think you have 9 trees, Linda, and I have 9 trees.
We do.
They're all up and they're all decorated in every bedroom, and
Wow.
and we had
Yeah.
the kids come, and we talked. I think we talked Wednesday about tradition a little bit, and one of the traditions is the kids come over, and in their room, it's decorated for Christmas. They have their own
Right.
they have their own ornaments that we've kept, and we then put it on the tree for them, and it's unique, special to them, and we've even asked them, do you guys want us to put up the tree in your room? Like, are you kidding me? Of course we want you to put that tree up, so it's kind of fun. So
That's fun. That's so fun.
so as we're talking about the end times, we've discussed the sequencing of things. Interesting. I had a really interesting discussion. I was at a board meeting this week and had a really interesting discussion with one of the board members he was talking about the end times, and the question was about how do we approach this? Because he said I can kind of see a lot of the signs that seem like they're there, and is it really coming, and how do I approach that? And then he had this really,
and there's some tension in living in that space of what you do with all of it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he asked me this question. He said, my kids, and by the way, they're now adult kids, 21, 24, 26.
Right.
He says they're a little bit aware of this, and we've had some discussions about maybe it's the end, and maybe Christ is returning. And he said their question to me was, if this is so, then that means I'm never going to live life. I'm not going to have the experiences of a full life. I'm going to get, either raptured or taken up.
Right.
And the end isn't going to be pleasant per se. So that means I may never actually fulfill all of life. He said, what do I say to them?
Right.
I said, well, two things. One.
A great question, by the way.
One is that eternity is going to be a very progressive place. Ultimately, there's a new heaven and a new earth, and it's physical, and the fulfillment of life will still actually go on. I said number two is that remember, when Christ comes, which is what we're going to get to here in the next couple of weeks, next couple of sessions, is called the millennium. The millennium is returning back to this earth and functioning as leaders, participators with the life of the physical humans that are here. And we'll have
I think that's not actually taught a whole lot about.
No.
I think we've been taught a lot about rapture. We've been taught a lot about watching the signs. We have not, at least personally in my background, have not learned much in terms of millennium. So I think that's going to be really interesting.
It's going to be really important.
And that's the source of a little bit of this question that you have here.
And that I said, so if your son, let's say, he's never been to Paris, well, I would have liked to have experienced that. Guess what? He will. In the millennium, he will. We're going to be able to go there and experience the beauty and the wonder. And it'll be the physical place with physical human beings, and we get to participate with that and experience that. So actually they will. And then I said, remember that the future of anybody in terms of their eternal place is based upon their desire to follow God's will. Now, if you receive Christ, you're eternally set. You will be with Christ in eternity. That's absolute 100%. You don't lose it. You can't kind of get it and not get it. No, if you're born again, you're born again. You're there. But then, and Paul goes into this in Corinthians. Your rewards, your place, your enjoyment of heaven is based upon your letting Him build the foundation, and then you follow Him with the will. And I said, so your kids, I said, right now, their two biggest questions, which he said, yeah, this is right, is what kind of work do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And then who should I marry?
Mm-hmm.
I said, that's their, at the moment, as they review preparation or things that God might be saying, they still are called to live life.
Right.
And do what? Well, follow God's will and take those two big questions and pursue where would you have me enjoy my work?
Mm-hmm.
And then who do you want me to enjoy it with?
Right.
And I said, keep going there, because your place in the millennium, for example,
Mm-hmm.
is and I said it's not going to be based on our skills. It's going to be based on our faithfulness to God's will.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And your enjoyment and your fulfillment and where you spend your energy is going to be based upon following God's will, which we know, by the way, includes what? Work
Mm-hmm.
and relationships.
Interesting.
It's really interesting.
So based on that, would you say, like, as you're wrestling that out with your children, especially older children, but that, like, unfulfilled promises. So let's say if the rapture came tomorrow,
Yeah.
and there are things that God has promised, is it accurate to say that unfulfilled promises that God has spoken will then take place in the millennium?
Well, it'll be translated to a different dimension.
Okay.
And how that looks, so that we know, for example, in heaven it says there's not marriage.
Mm-hmm.
In heaven. There's a different relationship. Now, it doesn't say you don't have intimacy
Mm-hmm.
with those, so that fellowship is going to be an important part of eternity, and it's going to be,
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be an intimacy and a joy to that intimacy that isn't fully described. Exactly what does that look like, other than it will be there. So like an
Okay.
unfulfilled promise, let's say your daughter is, my promise is for you to get married,
Mm-hmm.
and the end comes, and they're not
Mm-hmm.
married yet. There's going to be a intimacy and a fellowship in heaven that they will experience.
Mm-hmm.
So the fulfillment of the essence of that, it'll just be different, because why? Well, you're not physically on earth.
Right.
You're in a new dimension,
Oh, that's interesting.
fulfilling
Okay.
that. Your work, for example, your work's going to be great. Or I have you geared toward, like, I know your daughter Anna is going to go to college, and okay, what do I do? And your kids, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say they're headed in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
and the rapture comes and the end comes, and they never get to fulfill that.
Right.
Well, guess what? That work will be carried on in eternity. They're going to do work that's going to fulfill them in the syncing up of who they are based upon their soul, which goes into eternity. So that for me, my role is as ever since I was a graduate of MBA,
Mm-hmm.
I've been involved in leadership and strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I've learned that it's better if I follow God's strategy than mine. So
Absolutely.
I've learned how to receive that and use the gift that I have to
Mm-hmm.
enjoy, leading that. Well, I know I'm going to be in the millennium. I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
a player in the millennium. Guess what? God will say, well, this is who your soul is. I'm going to have you keep doing that.
Interesting.
In the millennium. And now it'll be different, because there will be, interesting enough, I'll have a lot of limitations that I currently have will be removed. And
Mm-hmm.
so I won't have to get on an airplane. If I want to go to, hey, I'm going to have a meeting in Paris, I'll be there. Like right now, I'll be right there. I go right through the wall, just into the meeting. Here we go. And interesting enough, my dynamic will be with people, because that's who's here during the millennium. I mean, so it's really interesting. So your kids,
fascinating. Yeah.
so your kids that are in learning that, going toward that, they already see this is part of the beauty of God's life is, think of Anna, think of Joshua and Caleb. Their questions. What does my career look like?
Right.
That's an important question.
That's a big question for them all. Yes.
And everybody has it interesting enough, all the time.
Yeah.
So that, okay, I got here. I know, like your son Joshua. Well, he's already involved in something, but it doesn't mean that's the end of it.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, what's next? Where do I move from here? It's always that way. So with your kids who are saying, I would like to know what that looks like. Okay, now here, two things. One, God already knows the answer to that. I already know the answer to that. And that's why he says, do you have a heart to follow me and let me give you the absolute best? You can short circuit it if you want to. And they can say, okay, I'm going to decide, I'm going to go do this, I'm taking this, I'm going to compromise this because I'm going to make money. Isn't that a good idea? And God said, well, if you'd have walked with me, I would have given you an exceptional place. So it's always about, do you have a heart to go, and then let me do it. I already know the answer to that. And it's not, and this is what's cool, it's not limited to this physical place. It'll be, if I already know the answer to that, because I'm syncing it up with your soul. When you go into eternity, particularly as we go to this next place of the millennium, I'm going to sync that up with who you are. I'll get you to where you're going to go, even if you didn't get there here.
Interesting.
It's really,
that's cool.
It's really interesting because, and this is why God says, if you delight in me and I delight in you, I'll give you what? The desires of your heart.
The desires of your heart, right.
Okay, now what is that? Well, that's the essence of who you are. And what I've made you to be, because, hey, Anna, I've already created you to have fulfillment in work that looks like this. And it's not go do it anyway. It's, I'm going to give you what syncs up with your soul. Why? Because that's how I made you. Guess what? That's eternal. Because our soul works in eternity. And by the way, work and relationship is into eternity. It continues. Right. So that it's really pretty cool.
That's fascinating.
So we had this great discussion. So it was, encourage them. Tell them to don't ignore and say, I don't care about if we're supposed to watch the signs or if things are giving me instruction. But at the same time, encourage them not to stop living life.
Right.
Keep seeking God's will. Keep processing truth. Because interesting enough, see, we tend to think, if the end is here, then the end is the end. Interesting enough, it's the end of the way the earth is functioning, which is what? Under the control of Satan. Because Satan is locked up. Now, by the way, he's loosed a little bit at the end of the millennium, but millennium is with sinful people who have to receive Christ, but Christ and us are physically here, so it's pretty easy to receive Christ, and there's no demonic anywhere. They're gone. So they're going to live a life not perfect, interesting enough, because why? They're sinful people. They still have the flesh. Guess what? Every day they have to do what? Deny self, learn to follow God's will. Now, it'll be real easy, because think about if you already around you had, let's say, the spiritual dimensions of people that you've known and have died, and they're back sitting next to you right now.
Right.
And they said to you, let me help you understand God's will. It would be, you would say, well, sure. Why wouldn't I? Because it's going to be, in other words, it's going to be a lot easier in that next millennium for people to follow God's will, because we're all going to be around to assist them in doing that.
Right.
And by the way,
that's cool.
And we know something. God's will is best and none better. So, what do you follow? So as we, put this together, it's this interesting tension of pay attention, listen, and the one thing I did discuss with him was think about, because I read to him, interesting enough, I read to him Revelation 1 to 3, which you and I have read. Actually, let's read that again if you have it. Read Revelation 1 to 3.
Let me just pull it up.
And it's a reminder of the instruction. Go ahead.
Yeah, it says, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the things that must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and keep what is written in it, for the time is near.
Yeah. So I read that to him, and I said, blessed are you when you hear it. When you read it aloud. So you got to do it with your family.
Right.
Do it with your group. Hear it and pay attention and follow what instruction I have. The time is near. So I said, so think of the people that read that, and in 90 AD. And in 150 AD and 250 AD and 1850 AD, they'd say, well, it doesn't seem like it's near to me.
It doesn't seem that near, right?
And I said, well, the definition of God and near is different. And I said, what do you think would be the reason that you might be in this yes but not yet? Even in your lifetime, why would he have you pay attention to that? And he thought about that, and I'm not sure. And well, there's got to be his answer was there's got to be truth that I'm supposed to receive about this that's important for my life now. I said yes. I said the healthy understanding of why we're supposed to pay attention to the end is that what is it describing? It's describing the activity of Satan that is moving with a goal of overrunning and overruling the entire earth so that there's no believer here, no Holy Spirit, and the world now is truly owned by, controlled by, and forever run by Satan. He still has that goal. Okay, so what is this all about? It's saying, well, first of all, do you understand that? Yes. And therefore, do you understand the world is characterized by that today? When he says it's near, the elements of what's going on with what the end looks like are happening today.
Right.
And you have an enemy, and you have a destructive world, and you have an enemy that's trying to thwart my will. He says, when you start to understand that, you start to realize, well, then I need to pay attention to what? God's will in the place of a very difficult place. Ultimately, it's going to be really, really severe. And by the way, during history, there can be periods of severity, or in my personal life, there can be periods of severity. Pay attention and receive these things that I'm showing you into your life today. And that's why I say to people, I think it's important to stay to the end times, and because of the signs that we can observe, Israel returning, the one world government now becoming almost a goal of people around the world, that COVID, kind of set that up. We can see certain things happening. Are we headed that way? Could be. But even if we're not, we need to understand, well, the thing I need to do in my life is to really follow God's will and let him instruct me at all times, which could be, I want you to prepare this way. I want you to do this. I want you to have fellowship. Don't worry that you can't go to these restaurants anymore. I'm going to have you do it in a different way. So
don't you think there's
really,
also,
go ahead. No.
Don't you think there's also an element there that is all about living with eternity in mind?
Yes.
Just like, I think about, when we parent, like our philosophy parent as we were growing up was, we want to parent with the end in mind. So we weren't so much, working on certain things. We didn't want behavior modification. We wanted character transformation. And so that was how we would parent, because we were going for the character of
Yes.
things more than just the behavior.
Yes.
And I think of the same thing in this, the time is at hand, is that reminder that we need to be looking with God's eyes and living with eternity in mind. And that means, the Great Commission and God's heart. One, is our heart aligned with his? Are we walking surrendered to him and repentant? And always aligning ourselves with his purposes, because what he cares about most, I want my heart to care most about what his heart cares about most,
Right. That's right.
And so aligning personally my heart, and then also carrying out his wishes, which his desires, just like you said, the enemy has this desire for all the believers to be gone. God's desire is for everyone to come to saving grace in him. And so to my part in that, as much as he opens doors for me to do it and prompts my spirit to, I want to be leading and discipling others to step into his desire and his will for them as well. And so it's that, to me, when I look at Revelation, there is the here and now of, okay, God, what do you want me doing? Preparing. Yes, I'm paying attention, but also this big exclamation point of the time is at hand, and there's people out there who don't know you yet. And I know your heart is to know them. And so I want to partner with you in bringing that to be.
Right.
And so that living with eternity in mind, I think, is a huge part of it also.
Absolutely. And as we've come, in our discussion, we've talked about the sequencing of it. Daniel has this 1 week left, so it's 7 years. It begins with a tribulation that the beast comes on the scene and sets up a one world government with a one economic system, a new one. And the beast was created by the harlot, and the harlot is the humans that are working to set this up. And so there's a process, because and we have organizations, like the Rothschild Central Banking. There's with the Council for Foreign Relations, CFR, Skull and Bones out of Yale. You can go to online, just look them up. They state it, one world government. We hear that by the world. When the G20 got together, they talk about globalization.
Right.
Let's all operate on a global basis. So the whole motivation is headed that way. And so,
well, and even as you look at like the World Economic Forum and their stakeholder capitalism, and their new Davos manifesto that they have online, talking, it's all moving towards one world government for sure.
That's right. And by the way, there's a lot of statements by leaders that capitalism is not to be embraced. That we need to go a different direction now, and not have capitalism at all. And that's a value that people are trying to, leaders who are trying to promote. So the beast is set up. One world government starts the tribulation. There's a mark of the beast that God says, as a remnant believer, don't take the mark of the beast. But remember, there's a false prophet who joins that system, and then one of the 10, that's a 10-unit structure, one of those heads is the AntiChrist. And the AntiChrist, through his cleverness, goes from 10 to 7 to 5 to 3 to 2 to 1. He's the last one remaining as a head. There's still the 10-unit structure, but he's the head of it. And then it was called Mid-Trib, 3.5 years, does the Abomination of Desolation, which is I am God. And the false prophet has supported that, and Satan is behind it all to say, yes, worship him, which ultimately means you're gonna worship me. And the world, by the way, willingly does that. And the only ones who don't are the Jews, Israel, who by this time have become believers. And then if we're left, the remnant who hasn't taken the mark of the beast and is following God, we're not participating in that either. So, and we've talked about somewhere in there is a rapture. Translation, we who are physically living, who are believers in Christ, don't ever see physical death. We get translated into a new dimension, and so we go through the process. So we talked about pre-trib. Before this all starts, they're gone. Lots of evidence that that may not be true. It's mid-trib, and then possibly post-trib, where we're actually here during God's wrath. So what we've talked about is we've come to this place of the seals have been opened, and we think a lot of these seals are pre-tribulation, so they could already be open. Then the Abomination of Desolation, so that puts us at mid-trib. That's when the final seal is unveiled.
Okay.
So we talked about that last time, Revelation 7, 1-8, and it talks further about that. Go to Revelation 8, 1-6.
Sure.
This is the final seal, and it's opened up at mid-trib.
Okay. When the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them.
Yeah. Okay, so the final seal, remember, this is now happening at mid-trib.
Okay.
Christ is the one that's unsealing. Remember, John said the only one that can do that is Christ. And we talked about the scroll. It's rolled up from the end and wrapped up and then sealed, wrapped up some more, sealed, wrapped up. So number 1 is on the outside.
Right.
Then there's 2, then there's 3, then there's 4, then there's 5, then there's 6. And we've already gone through the 6.
Okay.
He said, okay, at mid-trib, he opens up the last 7th seal.
The 7th seal. Okay.
Okay, so in other words, this is it. Now, it's really interesting. When he opens it up, he's saying that the prayers of the saints is incense. Now think about that. What the heck is that? The prayers of the saints are incense, which is the way they view it in heaven. What do you think that means?
I have no idea, but I would imagine that's, when you think about the prayers that have gone before all of this for, generations and generations and generations, praying into the coming of God and Christ's return, that is being lifted up.
Yep. Yeah. And it goes back to see the Old Testament imagery that when they were in the Holy of Holies, the high priest would burn incense.
Right.
When he went in to the Holy of Holies, and the same thing, by the way, when the tent of meeting, when Moses went in, and Joshua and Caleb, they burned incense. Well, when they went in there, what were they doing? Communicating with God.
Right.
And receiving God's truth and understanding his will and demonstrating the truth and the power of God. So that what he basically said is that the form of incense, by the way, incense rises and it fills the room.
And it fills the room
with
definitely.
a very attractive aroma that is stimulating. And there's a connectivity spiritually. So he basically says that the way they view it in heaven is your prayers rise to them as a sweetness, and it's a point of communication. And this is why we spend a lot of time talking about prayer. It's not God, would you? It's what is your will?
Right.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. What is your will? And then we're going to discuss receive and have understanding of your will, which, by the way, is what we said is the key piece for anybody at any time, is to know God's will. And the incense is that dialogue, that prayer. He said, that's what we see and experience in heaven when you have true prayer. And it's supposed to be pleasant to you and pleasant to us. And then he says, I took it, and I took it in my hand, with the incense. And he said he fills it from fire, and he throws it to earth. And he said, by the way, these 7 angels in verse 2 were given what? Trumpets. Okay, what does a trumpet represent? You know what that means?
That, right?
Well, it's
that announcing his power.
The trumpet was always, and this is Old Testament symbolism that now is attributed to this moment, but it was a call to judgment. It was a call to attack. It was a call to, I'm blowing the trumpet, and that means everybody get ready, because we're going to battle, and God's judgment is going to be executed with our fulfilling and following His way into battle. So, like when Joshua, and if you remember the simplicity of the first one, Jericho.
Right. And they blew the trumpets and the walls fell down.
They blew the trumpet is God's going to act, bringing judgment against the city. And so trumpets, the blowing of the trumpet is always a symbol. Judgment is here, and let's go. We're going to battle, and God's going to do it. And he said, so he gave the angels the trumpets, get ready to blow it, and then he throws it down to heaven or to earth, and they said there were noises, thunder, lightning, and an earthquake. So it's basically saying, and by the way, it's a worldwide storm. Think about that. See, it's not just, hey, you got a typical thunderstorm in Denver,
right?
Or what you experienced there in New Hampshire, which you can get some pretty good, what I call thunderclappers. It's worldwide,
right?
And it's announcing this is it, and he throws it to earth and says, "This is it." And the angels prepared to blow the trumpets.
Right.
Okay, so what they're doing is interesting enough. They don't blow them all at the same time.
Okay.
These are now sequential. Over what? Over the next 3.5 years.
Okay.
And it starts with this moment of
and this is the second half of the tribulation.
Second half is called the second part of the tribulation, last 3.5 years, and it kicks off with the Abomination of Desolation.
Okay.
The Antichrist saying, I'm God, everybody worship me, which, by the way, the earth does. And God says, that kicks off my judgment now against earth.
So is that really, so it's like that, and then the opening of the 7th seal, and then the trumpets begin, and judgment begins?
This is it.
Okay.
And this is it. Here we go. And now God is bringing his wrath against the earth.
Okay.
Okay, now we do have a picture of this. Think of Moses and Pharaoh. What did Moses say? Let my people go.
Right.
What did Moses say? Or what did Pharaoh say? No.
Nope.
And God said, okay.
And then plague, and then plague, and then plague.
So let him know that I'm going to bring judgment against him now because of that. And so the plagues were God's judgment, wrath against Pharaoh in Egypt. And they were physical, real stuff that happened that came against him. Now, and this is where, as we look at the rapture, the two possibilities, let's say that if we are through the first part of the 3.5 years, which all evidence is they are, because he says we're persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we got to be here to be persecuted. So
Right.
we probably, all indications being is that we are going to be here during the first 3.5 years,
Right.
and that the pre-trib rapture approach may not be correct. Now, again, it's not
Right.
that it isn't correct. It's just it may not be correct.
There's plenty of doubt to it.
So I would, if from my perspective, what I do is I'm saying, I hope it is, but I'm not going to prepare.
But I'm going to prepare as
I'm going to
if.
prepare as if it's not, so that I'm aware of it and know what to do. But at the mid-trib, either because of God's wrath, He's going to rapture us and take us out then, leaving only Israel as the believers on earth. Because remember, we talked about the fact that the tribes, all of them become believers and are sealed with Christ and the Holy Spirit. Or we're here, but somehow we're protected. Just like Moses and Israel was protected. They were there when the plagues came.
But they were protected.
But they never had the impact of it. So anyway, this is what happens. He said, okay, this is it. And the reason he's bringing judgment is because the world literally is worshiping AntiChrist, anti-God, not God.
Right.
And the whole world is that way. And he said, because of that, I'm bringing now judgment against the whole world and the work of the Antichrist. Okay, so he now starts to describe these. And these are sequential. And as we read through them, just picture that these are going to happen over 3.5 years. So let's read 8, first of all, verse 7. This is the first one.
Okay. The first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood, and these were thrown upon the earth. And a third of the earth was burned up, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Okay, so,
well, the first one is I'm just going to eliminate all vegetation of a third of the earth. So you're out. You're not going to be able to function anymore. So it's possible that people, will not function and/or they'll be in serious position, but they lose their ability to have food because everything is literally burned up. Now, a lot of people look at that and say, is that when America is no longer part of the story? Because we're North America, North and South America, we're the third of the earth. Is that us?
Oh, interesting.
Could be.
I had never heard that. Fascinating.
It could be that we're not a big player for sure. And are we just consumed by this and a third of the earth is burned up? Okay, let's go to number 2, 8 and 9.
The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Okay.
So remember, John's seeing, and he's visualizing, and think about if we could go up and be elevated and see on the oceans. See, we would see hundreds and hundreds of ships back and forth. And remember, he's seeing big, as we know, these are big tankers. These are big container ships that are back and forth. And he says, what happens? Well, he attacks the oceans, and a third of the ships get destroyed, which means the people in them get destroyed. So the commerce gets big disruption. We talk.
Interesting.
We talk about supply chain problems.
Right.
What if one third?
Fascinating.
What if 1/3 of all the ships right now just got eliminated?
Right.
With all their stuff on it.
That's fascinating. I can't help but think when you say that, and this may have nothing to do with it, but I'm just bringing it up. It says something like a great mountain burning with fire. You think about a volcano, and then it brings to mind, like, some of the scientific studies that have been done on La Palma, and the eruption of that volcano right now, and what were to happen to the earth if it actually fell off into the ocean and created a big tsunami and the destruction. And I'm like, oh, that really kind of is described. The research they've done is described in that. So it kind of gives us a picture, even if that is not it, gives us a little bit of a picture of how something like that could happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can imagine a third of all the animals in the sea, die, which, all by itself, think of the, them floating around and they're dead and they're decaying. And,
right.
This is the issue is, as we're looking at these, is
we want to be out before this happens.
The magnitude of this is unbelievable, because we can't fathom. So a third of all the ships in the world are gone. Yes, a third of all the animals in the sea is gone. Yes. Okay, go to the next one. 10 and 11.
The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter.
Okay, so number 2 is oceans. Interesting enough, except for a little bit of what they call desalination, we don't get our water from the ocean.
Right.
Because it's salt water.
Right.
We can't drink it. So
mostly our water source is rivers and streams.
Here he's saying the third of the water, fresh water, rivers and lakes, is turned bitter, and it becomes polluted, and they die because of it. And it says because it was made bitter, and it would be, in a sense, they either die from the disease of it, or they die because they can't get water.
Right.
And they just die because of it. So a third of the fresh water around the world is made, and undrinkable, and it causes death from the people who are affected by that. Okay, so think about what's happening. God's bringing judgment of things on earth, and the impact is that the people of earth are dying. Really, physical death.
Right.
And it's obvious and clear what's happening. And we'll see the significance of this. Okay, go to number 4, 12, and 13.
The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of their light might be darkened, and a third of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise a third of the night. Then I looked, and I heard an eagle crying with a loud voice as it flew directly overhead, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, and at the blast of the other trumpets that the 3 angels are about to blow."
Yeah. So he's moving. This is probably sometime during the end of the second year, maybe into the third year. And it's saying everything, the moon, the sun, the stars, there's a darkness to that. There's something that happens that they don't shine, which we know when that doesn't happen, there's big, big implications. And the angel flies around the earth. And what does he say? Verse 13.
Basically, whoa, watch out, because there's a few more coming, and it's going to be even worse.
Hey, you think this is bad? This is only number 4. There's 3 more coming, and it's going to really get bad. You guys understand? Are you understanding this? Whoa is you got to pay attention to this. Now we'll see something here pretty, and the next time we start, as we pick this up, that, and I'll give you a heads up, nobody pays attention.
Right.
It's shocking to me. I mean, it's I one of the questions I have is in spite of the absurdity of what's going on, you're telling me that nobody says maybe we're following the wrong guy? But we'll see why. And I believe this is part of the transformation that is going on in the world right now, where the result doesn't match anything and they're not questioning it. Like, for example,
Right.
There's cities that are taking away the police forces under a thought of, we don't need it anymore, let's do it a different way. Well, guess what? Crime's skyrocketing.
Crime is going crazy.
I mean, it's skyrocketing. Yeah. There was this is to me hilarious, but because of what's happening in San Francisco, particularly in Northern California, thieves can literally walk into stores and just take it, and they're not even challenged by it. Well, there was an article in the Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle, last week, and it said to the population, probably you ought to reconsider and understand that thieves are going to come into your homes and take stuff, but don't be upset about that. Just let them do it. And don't call the police, and don't worry about it, because they're not going to help you. And it's like,
right.
Well, wait a minute. Does that make sense to you? I mean, it doesn't make sense, but there's a thought of, well, so what? Let's do it this way. And that's what we're seeing here. See, is that
right?
With all this
it's just deception.
With all this destruction, the mentality has shifted from any kind of a, wait a second, maybe this isn't right. And interesting enough, there isn't anybody on earth that actually says that. It's shocking to me, but you can see the thing. So remember, last 3.5 years, we've now been four judgments that are sometime during the first into the second year, maybe the third year, we'll see. And it's God against the earth, and he sends it. So we'll pick this up next week. We're going to go through these more, because you got to, and again, you can kind of see a little bit what they're like. But the key is, it's massive destruction.
Right.
And it's physical stuff really happening to people on earth because of it. And we got to understand, what is that, and what's the implication of that. So we will get into that again next time. If you have questions, send it to them at questions@afjministry.com, or put it on the YouTube, and we'll help you understand it. But we're moving into this second part of the tribulation, and this is God's wrath on earth. And it's kind of important to understand that.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. This is fascinating and important for us to really be looking at also, and again, just reminding us to live with eternity in mind,
Amen. Yep. And realize that God has a will, and he'll have for us, he has a way to guide us through that. So trust that. So we'll see you next week, and hope you had a great Thanksgiving week, and we'll pick up this topic again next Friday, a week from now. And then next week, we continue to talk with our series on overcoming worry, fear, and anxiety. So we'll pick that up on Monday.
Sounds great. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
All right. See you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.